Planet Jewel Orbit and Capitulum, capital city of the new Terran Empire, March 18th, 1000, Standard Calendar. High Fleet Admiral Sir Gabriel Len Lankowski, Chief of Naval Operations, sat at his desk in the shipboard office, seemingly looking out over the huge park that stretched to the north of Imperial Naval Headquarters. Seemingly, in that this was only a holographic projection on the wall of the office. Seemingly, in that the High Admiral was really at feverish work within his mind, tapped into the databanks of the super battleship Valkyrie. These were in turn capable of tapping into every military and governmental database in the capital city below, which meant that most of the information known to man was at his mental fingertips. He gazed out over the maples and oaks in the park, their leaves rippling in the breeze coming off the bay a half-dozen kilometers distant. From his height in the imaginary building on the hill, he could see the miniature sails of larger pleasure vessels upon that water. He sighed as he looked at those ships, thinking back to his history lessons, learned so earnestly in the academy so many years ago. In some ways, we are no more advanced than they were in the days of sail, he thought, his mind turning inward. Oh, we can travel almost infinitely faster, but the distances are almost infinitely greater as well. And just like the frigate captains of old, the men who commanded the pickets of the fleet were powers unto themselves. They had no way of knowing, when they entered a system and saw an alien ship ahead, if it was friend or foe, or if their actions might make it one or the other. They had to be on their toes, but not too provocative, and directions from headquarters might take months to reach them on the closest approaching ship, whose orders might also be out of date. Many times it was months before ships on patrols to the less densely populated regions were known to be missing. It might be many more months before they were discovered, if at all. I don't even know all of my admirals, much less my captains, thought the man, as he scrolled through the personnel lists in his mind. Oh, he could bring up their names, as well as a dossier on every man and woman in the fleet. But he truly didn't know them. He wouldn't even think to look at them unless someone further down the chain tagged them for his attention. So he was more insulated from the men who actually fought for the Empire than any leader in history. The High Fleet Admiral dismissed the thought from his mind as he concentrated on the most important sector of the Empire at this moment, the sector that was under assault by the ancient enemy, returned to attack the human race once again. All he knew right now was the information that had been sent to Sector Command over the series of hyperlinks that were this era's equivalent to telegraph lines strung between the colonies, and the return reply of the sector commander with his dispositions, and really nothing else, except that the new Emperor of Terra was aboard one of the warships that was likely to meet the enemy, and that the young man didn't know he was Emperor yet, and maybe never would, if he died in combat. We have to make sure that doesn't happen, thought the CNO, looking back into his office. But how? The CNO buried his face in his hands for a moment as he agonized over the situation. The new emperor in waiting was a very young man, but he was a young gentleman of the fleet, who had undergone fleet training and a deployment to a warship. The next in line, a distant cousin, had none of the training that the military instilled in their young ladies and gentlemen. The military's sense of honor and duty. And from what the High Admiral had heard, the man was a fop who was beholden to several members of the Imperial House of Lords. We've just received a message from Sector 12 HQ, came a voice over the intercom. I think you will want to see it before we upload it into the databanks. On my way, said the Admiral, slapping his hand on his desk and hoping the news was something that would allow him some action. Because no matter how long it had been since he had been at the spear point of the fleet, it was still hard to sit and wait, while others took the action that caused a win or a loss.